I just think everything I said isn't going to be on the recording. Okay, I'm gonna start back in that, and I'm gonna say for the recording, this class is not designed. I'm sorry, I forgot to turn it on, and so I've been talking for 10 minutes, and I do that from time to time. I try not to, because then I try to post these post all my lectures on Canvas, or I post them to YouTube, link them to Canvas, so that if you are not able to attend, you can follow along on what we did. It'll be recorded and it'll be linked from Canvas. And I'll show you where to find it on Canvas. And you can also follow me on YouTube. I don't do Twitter. But this course is not set up yet for an online delivery. It's like 1309. After I've gone through it a few times and I get all my exercises and everything lined out, I don't have that here yet. So I'm still building this course. And you'll probably realize that as we go through it. So, it'll have a few rough edges, but just bear with me and we'll get through it. But it's for those of you who are going to attempt to take it online, I never told you that it was an online class. It's not set up for that yet, but I'll do my best. I'll live stream everything and record everything, well, most of everything, and get it posted for you so that you can follow along. Okay. I usually try to break this syllabus down. The syllabus is kind of a waste of time. We pumped it full of so much stuff, 7 or 8 page syllabus. I'm used to a course syllabus being 1 page. Anything over 1 page is too much. Maybe 2 pages, and then they started adding stuff. Well, we want to put this in there, and we want to put that in there. And what else do we have in here? Online discussion, methods of attendance policy. I'll talk a little bit about the attendance policy. What else do we have? Somewhere in here is a Americans with Disabilities Act. Somewhere in here it talks about you might have to have a police check. I'm supposed to put that in here. Well, I'm serious. Some because 1 or 2 of our degrees has a law enforcement are for law enforcement. They want us to put that in all of them. I don't see it. I guess I skipped that one. I'll have to go back and put that in there. This syllabus is going to be subject to change. Usually it's a contract, but I don't see anything in here that's particularly important. Let me tell you what is important. My attendance policy is fairly lax, meaning that I look at Canvas. We're going to be using Canvas heavily. So to that end, it will be possible, I suppose. I'm not saying it's impossible to take it online. I'm not telling you to do it. But we're going to use Canvas heavily. We're going to use YouTube and Zoom heavily for the lectures. And if you log into Canvas on a day, then that is essentially saying that you were attending the class on the day. If you do anything on Canvas, that's doing something. I need you to log into Canvas to show me that you are alive. I'll probably post some kind of a quiz. Are you alive? True, false? Hint: the correct answer is true, because I need something turned in to validate that you're here. I tend to have a relaxed deadline policy. That's the other good thing about Canvas. Back in the old days of teaching, when you had to hand me a paper and a diskette, I had to keep track of them. And the hardest part about grading papers was sorting them into their appropriate piles. Well, Canvas does all that for me. So once you turn it into Canvas, it's turned in. If you turn it in late, oh well, it doesn't have a penalty on it. But don't expect me to just jump up and down to grade it. If you turn it in late, I might not get it graded right away. So please don't be sending me emails. Why haven't you graded my program that I turned in 2 weeks late? Well, gee. So I don't always. My grade book is set such that it records grade. If you have not turned something in, it does not record it as a 0. It just doesn't record it. So if you turn in one paper and make a 70 and one paper and make an 80, your average is 75. But if you haven't turned in 2 papers, it's really 75. It's really half of 75, 37.5. Okay, so but it will show you, but it just doesn't count them until the end. And then I said the reason I do it that way is if you turn in something and then the due date passes and I haven't graded, it counts as a 0, and that causes everybody just to freak out. So I don't want people freaking out. Therefore, I said it not to count it. So that way I don't always get right to grading it, but then you see your work, your grade book with 0s in it. Hello. Okay. I'll repeat the important stuff here in a minute. Let me see how we're doing on our install. Here's some stuff that okay, so we've had a successful install. It gives me the connection string. This is how it's connecting locally. By the way, we will be connecting through TCP/IP on our local box. So we have to have that running, but it usually is. I have the install logger, installation media. Nothing really here that I need, so I'm just going to say close. Am I sure? Of course I'm sure. Okay. Now the database is installed. If I want to see the database, I go to my Windows Administrative Tools, my Services, scroll down to SQL Server, SQL Express. Don't worry about any of the rest of them. It's just SQL Express is the one we want to. And notice that it is running. Now, at home, I suggest you set this. I suggest that you right-click it and go to its properties at home. And I suggest you set its startup type to manual. Okay, you do this because SQL Server, we have a joke about SQL Server, or any database really, is how much of your computer resources does an SQL Server need? And the correct answer is all of them. Okay, it's going to drink your processor, it's going to use your memory, it uses your battery. And so you really don't like the thing running if you're not using it. For the same reason that when you park your car in the driveway at night, you turn the engine off. I know it's a whole lot easier just to run out there and it's already running, already warmed up for you, but you're going to turn the engine off because it consumes your resources and your fuel all night. And so the same thing is true about having SQL Server running if you're not actually using the SQL Server. Turn the darn thing off. So you would turn it to manual. And then whenever you were done, you would go here and just say stop. You can also stop it from the Management Studio. You're free to put a shortcut to this guy on your desktop. Okay, next thing I'm going to do, I'm going to go back to the SQL class. The last one we just installed was SQL Server. Next one is actually a little bit bigger. This is the Server Management Studio. SQL Server Management Studio, and I'm going to execute that. And I'm noticing this is a little bit different from, I guess I'm going to have to change my video. They've apparently done an update to the installer. So it's a little bit different, but we're going to do exactly the same things. So we have to install the SQL Server and the SSMS, the Management Studio. In SQL Server, unlike Access, The graphical user interface and the database engine are two different pieces of software. So the database is now running. The database is installed. The database is running. I can connect to the database and I can do stuff with it. The SSMS, the Management Studio, is the piece of software that talks to my database and it gives me the graphical user interface. And so we'll say yes to install it. And we'll say yes to install it. Okay, click install to begin. So we'll click install. And I think we get to watch it install for a while. Okay, this is the one that's a little bit different. This is release 17. If you have a different number here of release, that's okay. You can use older ones. By the way, the question just came up. What if I don't have Windows 10? What if I have an older version of Windows? Okay, I recommend that you drop back to SQL Server 2012. Somebody was just installing today and they told me that 2014 worked for them. Oh, come in. I would go back to 2012. 2012 was a stable version and it was around for a while and it's still viable. You can still, anything we were doing in 2016, you can do in 2012, probably. Okay, I'm gonna go back to the syllabus. Okay. Hello. Maybe I should have backed off a little bit on the first night, but well, I need to here I have some SQL uploaded, or some SQL that I've written, and I wanted to go over this. This is just this basic creating tables, and this should be pure review. Okay. First thing that I want to point out that I didn't point out in the 2309 class is that this window, not this window, this is Notepad++. I don't have my SQL window installed yet. I'm installing it now. But this window that would be my SQL query is a programming window. What I type into there is an SQL program. So we tend to think of it, we were talking about it last semester in a select from where query. And I told you that that was an SQL program, and that is an SQL program. That's the smallest piece of the program. But we can link a whole bunch of those together in our window, and that becomes what we call an SQL batch program. Okay, SQL batch. Anytime you turned in an assignment to me, what I did with it was I loaded it into my SQL server. I know how many rows I'm expecting to get out of that. I run it and it tells me how many rows the whole thing returned. So it executes your statements one at a time. Bing, 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 bing. If there are any errors in there, they pop up right there and I come away with bloody hands. But it's a program. So this is a program. Now it's created into other programs. Notice some things about it. It has some if logic in it. Get there. If logic, as we are expecting. Our C program could do if then else. The database program can do if then else. I'm going to refer to this language that we're going to be talking about this semester as, excuse me, T-SQL. Its full name is called Transaction SQL or Transact SQL, and it's commonly shortened to just T-SQL or TSQL, depending on where you are. I've started calling it SQL, but I've always been one that called it SQL. So that's what this language is. Here is one statement. It is an if, then, else logic. Now, I'm about to create some stuff. So I'm going to create a table. Anytime I create anything, so these are called the DDL statements, data definition language statements. Data definition language, i.e. creating stuff and dropping stuff, typically does not go into an SQL program. You typically do those in a batch like this. So we're going to talk about programs now. We're going to be writing programs that are not in this batch file. We're going to be writing compiled programs that we execute and run, kind of like C. When you write your program in C, you type your program, and then you got a little button or some step there that says, okay, compile it. And then it's usually part of the same step now where you compile it and you link it. Then you have an executable file. Now you run that executable file. In an executable file, you have to run the whole thing. You can't just run a piece of it. In this file, this window I'm looking at here, I can run any piece of it. So if I wanted just to highlight this one statement, I could say, okay, run that. Now I'm not in SQL Server, I'm in Notepad++. I personally like Notepad++ as a cute little editor, but it does, I don't have a run button. I'm gonna go back over there and check to see how my SQL is doing. That's still a ways. Okay, Go. Go is unique to T-SQL. What Go does in a SQL batch program, it breaks it into pieces. So that says the program above it is done. Over in that program, start a new SQL batch file. Anytime you're creating something, it should be bracketed with Go. I didn't make a big deal out of this in the 2309 class because it didn't really hit us until we got to creating views, and then we had to worry about it. It is a good idea, anytime you see that word create, anything, create something, or really for that matter, drop should be, but drop it just happens. So to create the table, get everything else finished, then start from a fresh, clean program and create the table. Then I would say again, after I have created that table, I'm going to bracket it again with a Go. Anytime I create something, and we're going to be creating lots of things in this class. We'll be creating programs, we'll be creating executable programs, and when we run it, it won't run the SQL, it will create the program that when we execute it, it runs the SQL. Kind of like C. Okay, so I create the table owners. Now, we should all be familiar with the term primary key. We have it written indelibly upon our consciousness what a primary key is. Well, good. I was going to go over that tonight. That gets us out of here a lot faster. Primary key. Do all tables have to have a primary key? That's a trick question.
No.
You can create a table without a primary key. It can be done. Will I let you call it a database table? No. Okay. So the fact that it can be done doesn't necessarily mean that it is. You'll see sometimes if a person just wants to create a little variable or something, they'll create a table that doesn't have, they don't fool with primary key. And you might see me do it. I might, I fuss a lot in my intro classes about we always do it this way, and then you get into the later classes and it doesn't always work that way. But We're not in intro class anymore. Generally speaking, in a statement, so this is a statement. Statements always end in a semicolon, even though SQL Server will let you not do that. I will be fussy about it because SQL Server is the only platform I know of that will let you get away without those semicolons. As we get to the compiled steps, they will have to have semicolons. So I've been fussy about that in 2309. And every time you forgot a semicolon, I said, semicolon goes here. If we were to try to compile that. Now, we won't typically compile a create table statement. It's just going to run just like this. That's the way we create tables. I'm not going to make a program out of that. It is a program. It's its own program. So it ends in a semicolon. It is a good idea inside of an SQL statement, here's one, do not have a completely blank line. That's not a completely blank line. That would be a completely blank line. The SQL Server will not have a problem with it, but other platforms will. So we're going to go ahead and adopt that. We don't have, if you want to have to skip a line, put a -- comment on that line. Something that keeps it from being blank. Okay, so I created a table owners, created a table pets, and what is this? Does that have meaning to everybody? Yes? Thumbs up?
Yes.
You good with that? What's your name? Welcome. You've been in my class before, I believe? Yes, okay. Foreign key? Okay. Okay. I remembered you. I lie a lot. Okay. So the foreign key, primary key has a couple of things about it. Let's see, I usually go over at some point, I talk about the 3 basic rules of database, the 3 fundamental, we call it the first normal form. And it says that in a database we access by content only. We never talk about the position of a record. I said, never give me the 3rd record or the 10th record or something like that. And then what, never? It's true that I can talk about the 3rd row of a table. And in fact, it's done in programming quite a bit. So we might relax that rule a little bit. But in general, in terms of just SQL, access is by content only. We never talk about the 3rd row, 2nd column. Let's see, access by content only, no duplicate rows. No duplicate rows implies the existence of a primary key. So there's probably one thing, I want to get it as small as I can. That one thing that differentiates the exactly one row or at most one row. For example, in a human resources database, that would probably be your social security number. If we don't have a primary key, we can give them a primary key. A date will work fine, a date and time stamp when we put them in there. Foreign key. When I say something is a foreign key, I'm saying that it references another table. And this is how I do a one-to-many relationship. So if I say, we talk about it as a parent-child. So I have a pet and I have an owner. So this might be a dog pound or a kennel club or something. I'm keeping track of owners. I'm keeping track of pets. One owner may have many pets, 0 or more. A pet has exactly one owner. Okay, so when I say something is a foreign key, I did not say it could not be null. A foreign key can be null. You cannot, it's quite possible not to have an owner. It isn't here because there's a constraint. The last constraint checks to see if it's not null. But just because it's a foreign key doesn't say it can't be null. It can be. If I put a foreign key on something and I put a value in there, I'm saying no bogus parents. So if I say that OID 1234 is the owner of this pet, then OID 1234 must appear in the owner's table. Fair enough. Have I bored everybody yet? Okay. Let me go check and see how my, okay. Well, we're going to hit this one, and it says that it has to restart for the setup. So I'm going to go ahead and, I guess, restart. Well, if I restart, I'm going to shut off all of my, I'll shut off my recording. Let me see if it's in there. Well, it's there. Server management. So I'm not going to restart. I'm going to see if it'll still run for me. It might, but it wants me to reboot the machine. Okay. If I reboot the machine, it shuts off my Zoom recording, and so I have to shut it off, and it's a pretty big process. So I'll probably wait until 6:50, 6:45 when we take a break, and then I'll boot it at that time. Okay. So the Server Management Studio is found under MS Microsoft SQL Tools 17. I don't think that means 20. It might mean 2017. Microsoft SQL Server Management Studio. Everything seems to be running well here. Well, we'll find out if it works. They told me I had to reboot. I've been rebooting, but I suspect there's a few features that didn't get installed. It's a little slow the first time. But I did eat potato chips with the microphone on. Let me go check and okay. It's connecting to the server. Now, we connect to the server. We can have more than one server. In fact, the server does not have to be on this machine. Most of the time, they usually are not on the machine. Most of the time, the server is off someplace else. Okay. The remote access feature of it allows me to connect to a machine that's in New Zealand. Right? It doesn't have to be on this machine. If it is on this machine, when I connect, if I can physically get to this machine, sit down at the console, I have a lot stronger connection to the machine. So the first way when I come in, I'm first set up with Windows authentication. Windows authentication is considered your strongest form of authentication. You are here. You logged into this machine with a Windows password. You are the person who installed this software. At least your password did. The first time I log in, I'm going to log in with Windows authentication, and I will say connect. When I connect with Windows authentication, I am connected as the system administrator. So I am the I can do anything. I can change any password. This is typically true of, for example, any kind of a web server, a network server. Remember Novell servers. If you could get seated at the console, logged in through Windows, you can boot in a single user mode and change any password. Okay, first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to right-click the server. That's the thing at the top. That's this guy at the top. Right now, database. See, server starts with PRC. Mine says PRC H133, and I think the next one's has to do with what computer it is. I'm going to right click it, the top, pull down to properties. From properties, I want the security tab. It's halfway down, about halfway down. Security, the very first one. It says server authentication. Notice that when we installed this version, the only way we installed it was with Windows authentication mode. Used to be you could select when you installed whether to install with Windows authentication or with both Windows. Okay, the newer upgraded one that we're installing now, I'll have to change my install video, says we have to come in here, we have to log in first as Windows, so I have to log in from the console and change it. So I change it from Windows, so SQL Server and Windows authentication mode. Okay. If you're installing with me, go ahead and do that. Rest of it I'm not too worried about. So this allows me, okay, says some of my changes will not take effect until SQL Server is restarted. It didn't tell me to restart the machine. It told me to restart SQL Server. This does not mean SQL Management Studio. It means SQL Server. Where is SQL Server? It's over in the Windows Services. Okay, I can go over there and do it. I can also right-click the server, pull down to restart. Okay, I can stop the server, but if I stop the server, I don't have any way to restart the server except going over to Windows Services and starting it. So I can say restart, and it will what we call bounce the server, stop it and start it again. Okay, restart, and it'll say, am I sure? I'll say yes. Yes. Stops it and starts it. I think I'll probably have to log in again. I think it's a good idea if I disconnected. And then connect again, because the server has bounced. Okay, now I'm ready to go. Next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go to my security tab, drop him down. The first one under it is logins. And this part runs just like it does in the video. Right click login, new login. Okay. I want my login to be SQL Server authentication. If I didn't do that last step, I would not have that option. I'm going to create my login. This is me. I am SW. When I give you examples, it's going to be with SW Smith. Your login will be your first initial, last name, or first initials, however you want to do it. You can make it as short as you want to or as long as you want to. It's yours. You can always change the password. You have full control over it. You just go back, log in with Windows authentication, and you own all of the accounts. So this particular guy, give him a password. Give him the same password twice. Don't know why it's so important. Okay, one thing I want to do is I want to take off of this enforce password expiration. We don't want our password expiring and having to go change it in the middle of the semester. Enforced password policy, I usually say that I think it's a good idea to get in the habit of using a strong password. Now, make one more note of something. Note the default database. Do you see it? What is the default database? Default database is master. But the only one that can write to master is the system administrator. I'm not the system administrator, praise the Lord. I don't want to be the system administrator in this one. We're going to talk about what we can do as the system administrator in this class. But right now, I just want an account that can't get into a whole lot of trouble. Okay, so we're going to leave that because that's the only database I have right now is master. Okay, so I need to have another one. But for right now, I'm just going to say okay. Now this login that I just created, this login, SW Smith will not be able to connect. If I try to connect, he's going to say, you can't write to the master database, and he's going to kick me out. Okay, so he won't let me connect. So I have to go to databases. I'm going to close the security. Databases. I'm going to right-click databases. I'm going to pull down to the first one is a new database. This is how I create a new database. Now, I can do this in SQL too. It's just a whole lot easier. You know, you can have my GUI when you pry it from my cold dead fingers, but and I'm not a big fan of graphical user interfaces for everything, but it sure does make life a lot easier here. Okay, database name. I'm going to give the database name, my name, SW Smith, _DB. Owner, I want you to make the owner be, you can type it in or you can browse for it. Check names. You could browse and gotten to it, but you can type in your name. This is your database, and you are the owner. So this is your database. My database, it is SW Smith DB, and I'm the owner. That's all I really need to worry about. When I get that, I say, okay. The rest of the stuff has meaning. You normally won't mess with it. Now the database exists. Now I go back to security, back to the logins, find SW Smith, go to his properties. You'll use your own. And down here, I'm going to change the default database to, what do you think? SW Smith DB. That is my default database. If I say create a table, that's where I will create the table. Okay. Open a file. Now I'm opened in my programming interface. The first executable line of all your programs, of all your batch programs, will be to select which database to use. Just because you selected right at first doesn't mean it has to stay that way all the way through. You can use other databases, you can jump around, and you can take something from one database, turn around and put it in a different database. But first of all, it has to say what is the default database. Now, if I didn't say use SW Smith, it would. But it is always a good practice to state what database you're using right at the beginning. It's a good habit to get into. So we're going to try, what does this do? It says if this object exists, if object ID Petrix is not null. It is different in other languages. If exists, you know, it just different when it talks about existence. Here we're talking about if the object ID is not null, drop it. In other words, if it exists, drop it. Notice that I'm dropping these tables in reverse order of when I created them. I had to create the parent table first before I could create the child table. After I've created the child table, I can, if I want to drop, then I have to drop the child table before I can drop the parent table. Otherwise, I would have an invalid entry in there. The others will have, other languages will have used the word cascade in there. Drop table tricks, cascade, that means to drop everything. So if you say drop the child cascade, I'm not sure. I think it just drops the foreign key constraint. not, as you can see, it's changing that to a red squiggly line under it, indicating it's an error. And this is because SQL Server does not use Cascade in that way. Cascade still is a word in SQL Server, but it's not used like that. So in SQL Server, we have to drop them in reverse order. What we created them, I think it is a good idea to do that, because that just means that you're watching what you're doing. I do not like Cascade. I've always called Cascade a resume generator. Okay, so I drop them in reverse order. I'm not going to go into all of this stuff a whole lot of detail. I have we talked about a many-to-many relationship? I don't always get to that one in 2309. In 2309, let's see, I have, okay, I have an owner. An owner has 0 or more pets. Therefore, we have the foreign key. I have a pet, and a pet has exactly 1 owner. A pet may perform 0 or more tricks. A trick, any given pet may perform 0 or more tricks. A trick, any given trick, may be performed by 0 or more pets. I have a many-to-many relationship. Pets and tricks. So this would be something like between patients and pharmaceuticals, right? A patient may be prescribed 0 or more pharmaceuticals. 1 pharmaceutical may be prescribed to 0 or more patients. And the way this happens is we create what we call a bridge table. I call it a bridge table. The book might call it something different. But basically, I have the primary key of both tables, the primary key of the pets table, and the primary key of the tricks table. Comes over into this. Together, they are the primary key of this table. It is acceptable to create a new primary key for this table if you want to. What did I call what? The table? The table I typically call, for demonstration purposes, I typically put the 2 names together and append them together, and that's the bridge table. Bridge table, linking table. Lookup, no, lookup table is something different. That's in Access. I consider that a 4-letter word. We might talk about a lookup table. Look, hey, it's got its points. Access does some things. There's nothing wrong with the stuff Access does. And everything that it does in there is something that there is a reason and a need for having it. Does the term lookup table mean something to anything to anyone else? It's essentially the same thing in Excel, except it's in Access. Basically, what they do is, and there's nothing wrong with it, but it's just a one-to-many relationship that's handled inside of the table. And it's, yeah. There's nothing wrong with it, but it violates a few things about database and confuses people. And if you're going to do that, then it should be done up at the form level. I'm not worried about doing it. I just don't think it should be done in the tables. Enough of that. I'm getting on a soapbox. I'm going to try to stay off of soapboxes this semester. So if you hear me start ranting and raving about something, Donald Trump this, say, no. We don't go there. We're not going there. Run out of time. Okay. Foreign key. Notice I have 2 foreign keys, and I name it Pets Tricks, and then the one that it references, foreign key, references pets. Another one, the tricks, references tricks. So basically, it comes out of the pets table, 1 to many, out of the bridge table, many to 1, giving me the many to many relationship. And if I execute this, bingo, oh, what's the matter? Oh, that's because I had it highlighted. Okay. I like this guy. You can also program just fine using Notepad++ and just bring it over to here. But this is our programming environment. Notice that I ran the program there, and I can put one thing we didn't talk about, I can print to the screen. I don't consider this okay. It is possible to print. We might do more of that. It makes more sense to print if we're going to be talking about executing more than one thing at a time. And so execute and begin batch, and then probably at the end of it, I would say, you know, end batch, we're done, something like that. I don't know that that's particularly important. Well, okay, I'm not going to spend a whole lot of time then on creating tables. I wasn't sure where we were going to be at the beginning of this class and how much time. I'm not going to spend really any time at all on creating tables. I think we're going to move right straight on into the programming. And into the programming, what you're expecting to find, well, what are you expecting to find in a program? A headache. Well, programs, all computer programming languages do exactly. If I ask you, what will you find in a car? If I tell you this is a car, this is a vehicle that drives on the road, what do you expect to find? A steering wheel, okay? And if it's a motorcycle, you expect to find handlebars, some way to steer it, some way to control where it goes, okay? You're expecting to find some way to make it accelerate, some way to make it slow down. It's really all I have to have, okay? If you're going to tell me it's a programming language, and remember I said a vehicle that drives on the road, I ruled out airplanes and trains, tanks. I'm you know, it's a highway vehicle, then it has these. If it is one of these iterative programming languages, iterative means it happens in order, and that's the first thing. Of course, if I call it iterative, SQL itself, SQL doesn't happen in order. In a select from where query, it doesn't happen. Select doesn't happen first. From where, that doesn't happen like 1, 2, 3. It happens in a different order. But in this iterative programming language, once we get outside of that SFW query, which most of them will be, or an update query, we're going to find that it happens in order. Iterative programming languages happen in order. That's the nice thing about them. Everything, first statement happens. It's just the statement, the select from where query is a statement, and we're going to find I can execute a select from where query in this program, reach into the database, grab something out of it, put it into a variable, and now process it in my programming language. Okay, that's the beauty of this. I can't do that in SQL. SQL, I don't have a variable. I need to have a variable for that, and that's the first thing we're going to get is variables. After that, I expect it to happen in order. If I put something in a variable, I expect to be able to go back there and get that value out of there 15 or 20 statements later. I expect to be able to change it, to add to it, to multiply it, to divide it, read it, write it into another database, do whatever I want to with it. So I expect to be able to process it. I process it using if then else logic. So I'm expecting to have that. If some condition, then do the consequence, else do the alternative. So condition, consequent, alternative, if then else. They happen, they're different forms of that syntax. I'll talk about what they are, but I expect to find that. If then else works the same way. And it's like the brake. I better find that brake. Brake had better be in about the same position in all cars. If it isn't, I'm going to have to relearn how to drive. Okay. Big shock to me on driving on the left a couple of summers ago. I didn't have any trouble with the gear shift. No, the gear shift was on the same side. The clutch and the brake and the accelerator were where they are on every other car, except my seat was on the right. Steering wheel worked like it always worked. The accelerator worked. The brake worked. The clutch worked. The gear shift was on the different side, but that didn't bother me as much. The problem with it was that the turn signal and the windshield wipers were reversed. I was everlastingly trying to signal a right turn and turning on windshield wipers. Oh well. But let's see. So nothing new there. If then else works like if then else has always worked. Every other programming language. So I'm not going to go into it. I'm going to talk more about it next time. What else are we expecting? Looping, while loop. Okay, I expect to be able to do a while loop. I'm expecting to be able to do a for loop. I don't think TSQL has one of those. We have to build it ourselves, meaning we just have to set the variable, check the variable in the while condition, and update the variable at the end. Ho-hum, like I can't do that. I'm expecting to be able to open a file. I'm expecting to do some things to open a file, but guess what? We don't use files in SQL, we use tables. How do I access a table in SQL? With a what? Well, we update it with a select from where query. So a select from where query gives us back a table. We can take that select from where query, grab some data, and process through that data using a loop, just like it were a file, and count stuff. In general, if you can do it in SQL, you stay in SQL. Okay, that's generally the caveat in programming. Don't write code that does something that you could do in SQL. Okay, so let's see, where are we going then? That gives me an idea of where to start. I'm going to go to my Canvas now. If I have it here. Canvas. Here. Okay, where are we going to start then in our modules? And this means that, okay, I'm not going to bother with the welcome letter about me. My hobby is building tandem bicycles. You don't care about that. Okay, I'm not going to cover chapter 11. Basically, that's creating tables, and read over chapter 11. Server Management Studio, creating a database we've done. I'm going to start off with in chapter 14 then. And that gives us more time to, so without fooling around and this, I'm going to start off with TSQL variables, conditional if logic, and looping processing. I'm going to try to get through cursors on the next class period. So I will have an assignment out there for you. I'm going to go ahead and make a kind of an initial assignment. What is your name? What is your quest? What is your favorite color for you to turn in? Just so I have something in the grade book for everybody. So I'm going to try to get through 1, 2, 3, 4. I'm going to try to get through cursors on the next class meeting. The cursor, remember, cursor is, you probably don't remember, but it's treating an SQL statement as a file and processing through it. So when you process a file, you are reading a cursor. You call that point that you are reading in a file a cursor. So when we are talking about a cursor, we open an SQL statement, execute it, and then we process through that table of stuff that we got back using our language. We can use variables, we can use if then else, and we can use looping. And things happen in order now. Okay. We still haven't gotten to the compiled part yet, but we're going to get there. By the way, all of this happens. So if when it talks about variables, when you declare a variable, this is just done in the, copy it, if I declare a variable, variables, and this always drives me nuts, variable names begin with the @ sign, okay? This declares that this means it is a local variable, means it exists in my program here. So when I say @payment due, and my favorite thing to do is forget that @ sign. Always do that. Every time I'm turning around, I'm forgetting to type it. Tie a string around my finger or something. That will stay there. Made it be $50. I don't have to say 50.00. I can just say 50. Or I could say 50.1, $50.10. I expect it to, I have some expectations about variables. I expect it to stay that way unless I change it. I expect to be able to go back to it later and find it. I expect to be able to change it. Add 1 to it. No, I don't have a plus plus. This isn't C. Okay. This language does tend to get a little bit verbose, but I'm expecting to be able to do the usual stuff you do with variables. Add 2 of them together and come up with a 3rd one. Nothing new here. It's going to get a little strange when we get to cursors. Okay. That's why I'm taking some time for that. And I will have an assignment for you on this posted. I will usually try to give you the file I'm using. I don't think anybody really needs this one. So my demonstration file that I'll use, I'll try to post that prior to class. I'll have it out there as an announcement. Other questions? And I'm going back into my headset. Questions? I have my headset on. Let's see. Angela Lee, are you there?
Yes.
Can you hear me okay? You have any questions about where we're at, what we're doing?
No.
Okay, so we're skipping over a lot of the review stuff. I'm not going to just go into a whole lot of just plain SQL. We're going to start right into the transaction SQL, and we're going to start in on the chapter 14. Was that 14?
Okay. Yes, it's 14.
Okay. Mr. Lin, any questions?
I got the script you sent. It's the same script you sent for another class, the create_AP.
Create AP. Yeah, we might use that to create the AP database. In that case, you'll have to create a database. to use it. I don't know whether we're going to use that or not. I'd rather send it to you and you have it and not need it than need it and not have it. I'm not sure exactly. The textbook refers to it a lot, so we may go ahead and we may do some work with that guy. So you have the file, you can run it. It would be, if you want to go ahead and create those files in your own database, if so, instead of use AP_DB. I was fussy about that in my 1309 class, but if you want to create those tables in your database, I don't really care.
Okay.
I fussed about it with 1309 people. I said, no, your database is different from the AP databases pretending to be the production database, but we might use this as an example. We might use those tables as examples. So if you want to run that file, that's okay. But you'll need to either create the database or change the use statement at the beginning of it. Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, I'll let you know when we're going to use that. Like I say, I'm going to start with this, and I will have an assignment posted, hopefully tomorrow. I always say tomorrow. How many times has that happened? Okay. I think we're going to wrap up. It would be past time for break. So I don't guarantee you I'm always going to remember your break. If you need to take a break and I don't remember, just give me a signal or something. I had a teacher a professor at A&M in my doctoral program. He would start talking and his whole lecture would be one sentence. And he would start talking and everything he'd say would be, and in conclusion, I would say, and he wasn't even getting close to a conclusion. And he'd keep us there for 4 hours and nobody get a break. So I do believe in breaks. I'm going to wrap it up there. I'm going to end the recording now. And so the assignment then is to get your book, look back over anything there from 1309. By the way, I went by, well, let me wrap up this recording. Okay, I'm about to turn off the recording. Anybody want to say anything? Got to say it now because I'm about to end the recording. I guess that means you don't. Good night.